good morning to His Grace Most Reverend Julian Liao, Archbishop of Kuala Lumpur, Father Philip Chua, Ecclesiastical Director of the Archdiocesan Mental Health Ministry, Father Paul Cheong, Parish Priest of the Church of St. Francis of Assisi, Reverend Priests, the speakers for the workshops, panelists, guests, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to the World Mental Health Day 2023. My name is Kelly Pang. I'm a clinical psychologist and also your MC for today. So, before we proceed with the program, I would like to make a few general announcements. Please observe silence and reverence inside the church, especially when the talks are being delivered. Have your phones on silent mode. Please wear your mask properly, covering the nose and mouth when necessary. Please wear your name tags throughout today's event. And at the end of the event or before leaving the premises, kindly return the name tags into the designated boxes. I believe it's at the exit of John Paul II Hall. Eating and smoking are not allowed in the church, hall, and workshop rooms except drinking mineral water. Any rubbish or waste is to be disposed of in the bins provided. Please help to keep the church compound clean. Also, this year, we have prepared an e-brochure in the form of QR code, which contains the event details and floor plan, speakers information, AMHM information, etc. So do scan the QR code to access it and obtain more information about today's event. As for upcoming forum at 3:30 p.m., all are welcome to write and submit their questions, in which they will be addressed by the panelists later. Questions may also be asked verbally during the session. Lastly, we have the medical team on standby for any emergency. Special thanks to Dr. Eileen for the morning shift and Dr. Teresa Audrey for the afternoon shift. For any stable cases, the individuals will be directed to Our Lady of Sorrows wake room. Without further ado, we shall now watch the video for World Mental Health Day 2023. Now, I would like to invite His Grace, Most Reverend Julian Liao, Archbishop of Kuala Lumpur, together with Reverend Father Philip Chua and Reverend Father Philip Paul Cheong, to the sanctuary for the opening ceremony. His Most Grace will be cutting the ribbon to officiate the ceremony. And His Most Grace will proceed with signing the banner. Father Philip Chua, Father Paul Cheong, and also Dr. Gerard Lewis. All right, we shall now continue with passing on the token of appreciation to His Most Reverend. We thank the Archbishop of Kuala Lumpur, His Grace Most Reverend Julian Liao, for his support for the World Mental Health Day 2023. Your Grace, please remain to give the opening speech and recite an opening prayer. Thank you again to Father Philip, Father Paul, and Dr. Gerard. You can take your seats now.
I think we should begin with the opening prayer. Can we increase the volume a little bit, please? In the name of the Father, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Dear Heavenly Father, we are grateful to you for having brought us here this day to celebrate this World Mental Health Day with the theme, Mental Health is a Universal Human Right. We thank you, Lord, for this ministry in our Archdiocese that looks into trying to heal, trying to help all of us who are going through difficulty. We thank you for all who are involved, as well as all of us who are suffering some form of mental stress. And we come here today, dear Lord, to seek understanding, to seek help, to seek skills to help us cope with the many mental challenges that are around us today. And we dedicate this day, we dedicate this time, this whole day to you, Lord, that you will bless all the proceedings, especially you will bless us, that we will be whole and that we will be, as you have created us to be, loving and lovable. Now, ask Almighty God to bless each one of you, to bless our speakers today, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. So a very good morning to one and all. As we gather here, we are indeed privileged to be able to discover a little bit more about mental health. And as I look around today in this church, I'm sure you have come here for different reasons. Each one of us has come for a particular purpose. And whatever that reason may be, I know that most of us want to be more aware of what mental health is and the prevalence of mental issues in our society today. And because we care, perhaps we know someone in our family or in our community who are going through difficulty, or perhaps we ourselves are struggling with our own mental health. And we want to discover, we want to know more about how we can cope, how we can address these issues. And so the theme for this year's Mental Health Day is Mental Health as a Universal Right. And this draws attention to the sobering reality that mental health issues are spread unevenly in our society, in the population. And there are some groups that are more susceptible, more vulnerable to these psychological stresses. Depression, anxiety, which all of us go through at some point or at some degree. And it is due to many reasons. Could be poverty, could be the challenges that we face at our workplaces, adversity, trauma that some of us go through, violence, discrimination that have affected us psychologically. And some of these groups I would just like to identify that may face more of these challenges are the elderly at our nursing homes. People perhaps from the LGBTQ community, people from the lower income. The higher income may have other stresses, people stealing their money perhaps. People detained in prisons or refugee centers, the homeless, the list can go on and on. And access to mental health services may be more difficult for people in this group that I just mentioned. And perhaps they are the ones who may fall through the cracks more easily. We have Dr. Gerard Lewis here today to address us and he will go through more statistics, more facts and figures for us to understand and comprehend the prevalence of mental health issues in our society today. Mental health is a critical component of our total well-being. Therefore, ministering to those who suffer from mental health is an essential part of the pastoral care of the Church. And the Church, per se, is not called to cure, but we are called to journey with, to heal. The curing we leave to the medical experts, but we can journey with those who are suffering mental health. We can be a source of accompaniment, a source of healing with our presence. And as I mentioned just now, it is a component, mental health, for our overall well-being. And so a holistic approach is needed because we are a unity of body, mind, spirit. We are all the sum total of these, our emotions, our psychological side, spiritual, physical. And we need to perhaps bring God also into this equation, that we are able to get strength from Him, that the sick, the healthy, all of us are all called to witness to what God is and is doing in our lives. And Pope Francis has spoken about this culture of encounter, where we no longer pass by in a hurry and bypass those that are around us, perhaps in need. We tend not to notice, not to recognize those that are suffering. Perhaps we do not want to see, we do not want to be inconvenienced. We know the Samaritan that was left for dead by the roadside, and many walk past on the other side. It is easier not to care, perhaps, but we are called to encounter one another. And so, my dear friends, equally important is that we do not remain behind closed doors of the comfort, the security of our homes, but to go out, to reach out to the marginalized, to those at the peripheries of society. We are called as church to be places of refuge and healing, not places of rejection or judgment. Our apostolic work should always bring us to those that need, that are voiceless, that are at the peripheries. We must venture out to the margins rather than wait for them to come to us. And this is the challenge for each one of us, my dear brothers and sisters. These acts of love can start small by perhaps first praying for one another, praying, which all of us do, for the well-being of our brothers and sisters. Prayer can be a powerful source of healing and peace for ourselves too, who are struggling with our own issues and interceding for others. And it can make a great difference when we move from praying for others into praying with them. So, dear friends, I would like to conclude. I believe that we too can be touched and be transformed when we reach out to others. When the more we give of our time to others, the more we receive. In our fragility and imperfections, we are called to accompany the fragile and the imperfect. People in this imperfect world in an imperfect way. As long as we abide in God's love, our God will make all things new and will perfect our journey on this journey of life. And I believe, dear friends, all of us need to address our own issues first before we can reach out to others. We need to resolve our own hang-ups, prejudices, our own challenges before we can effectively help others. So let us together with Christ, with the Church, let us move forward encouraging everyone, clergy, religious, laity, all of us, to partner together with people of goodwill in this indispensable work of healing and caring for all who are going through mental stresses, which includes you and me at various degrees. And our Catholic faith provides us with this consolation and this firm hope which strengthens our resolve. In eternity with God, every beautiful thing in our lives that is now unfinished will be completed. All the good that is scattered will be gathered together. Everything that is lost will be found. All hopes that are now thwarted will be realized, and all that is broken will finally be restored. May God bless each one of you and bless this Mental Health Day today in SFA. May God bless you.
We express our gratitude to your grace for your kind speech and also your prayer. We shall now have our first talk for the day. Before I invite the speaker, I would like to provide a quick introduction about him. Dr. Gerard Lewis has been involved in the field of education, counseling, and training for over 30 years. He has spent over 10 years in the educational leadership in mission, private, and international schools in Malaysia. He has been with the Help Education Group for the last 21 years. Dr. Gerard is currently the CEO for the Help Education Services and Help International School, as well as a Pro Vice Chancellor Division of Wellbeing at Help University. Dr. Gerard is a counseling psychologist by training. He is also a counselor educator and has extensive experience in the training, supervision, and development of both professional counselors and counselors in training. I would now like to invite Dr. Gerard to deliver a plenary talk entitled Mental Health is a Universal Right.
Thank you very much, MC. Good morning, Your Grace, Archbishop Julian, Father Philip, Father Paul, friends. Thank you again for the privilege and the invitation of addressing our friends today at the World Mental Health Day, organized by the Archdiocesan Mental Health Ministry. There are just four things I want to talk about today. First of all, when you look at the topic, there are two elements to it. One is the issue of universal human rights, and the question then we have to ask, what constitutes universal human rights? What's the background to this term, universal human rights? So I will spend a few minutes talking about that. I want to also spend a few minutes talking about what is mental health, because there are a lot of perceptions, misunderstandings about mental health. Most people, when they think about mental health, they actually think about mental illness. Yeah, people who suffer from mental disorders, serious mental disorders. And then I want to show the link between, in what way is mental health a universal human right? Because when you look at the populations under the Universal Human Rights Act, you will find there are many populations, as Archbishop mentioned, that are deprived of various rights. And as a result, what is the social, emotional, psychological impact on them having those rights deprived? Yeah, and then I will end by suggesting some ideas of what exactly we can do. Okay, so let me begin. Do I have a clicker here or something? A clicker? No? I hope you can see this. Apologies if it's a little small, yeah? So the Declaration of Human Rights was established by the UN. There were, I think, 48 signatories. 8 at that time didn't sign on this. Countries like Russia, Soviet Union, a couple of other Eastern European countries at that time didn't sign off on this. Currently, we have got about 190 over signatories to this document, this declaration. There have been various iterations of this. Malaysia is a signatory to this Universal Declaration of Human Rights. At the point of its passing and its launch, yeah, Eleanor Roosevelt spoke to the UN General Assembly, and she had this to say. Yeah? The declaration is based upon the spiritual fact that people must have freedom in which to develop their full stature and through common effort to raise the level of human dignity. That's the basis of this Declaration of Human Rights. To have every human person, we talk about the dignity of the human person, that every human person has that freedom, the choice to develop to the fullest potential possible as God meant us to be. I mean, when you want to put a religious spin to it, yes. And that's why it's a spiritual fact that if we are made in the image and likeness of God, yes, then all of us, every single person deserves that right to have the opportunity to grow and develop. I think that's important. And therefore the question remains for us. What happens? What happens to the person if that right is deprived? If they are deprived of such rights. There are about 27 such rights. I won't go through all of them, yeah? I will just highlight a few. Can we go to the slide before this? The slide before this? The slide before this? Just a slide before this. Yes. I'm just going to highlight a few. I won't go through 27, don't have enough time to talk about each one of those. So this will zoom in that document that I showed you. So the preamble to this document is this: we are all born free and equal. Let me repeat that. We are all born free and equal. There are no such thing as slaves anymore, but there is such a thing as modern day slavery. Even though there are no slaves, even though we pay people to do a job, we don't pay them sufficiently for them to be able to live a life of dignity, right? But we are all born free and equal. So if you're born free and equal, that means the opportunities that should be provided to everyone should be free and equal. But then the question obvious is when we look around us, are they free and equal? Everyone is entitled to these rights no matter their race, religion, sex, language, or nationality. Everyone has a right to life, freedom, and safety. Okay? And so out of the 27 elements or areas of universal human rights, today I'm just going to focus on the few aspects. One is we all have a right to seek asylum in another country. So there will be people who are in war-torn countries, who are persecuted in their own countries, who want to free that because they worry for their own safety, for their own life and the lives of their family. And so they have a right to seek asylum. But when asylum seekers come to us, do they receive asylum? Right? And I will show you some statistics in a short while. Do we welcome them? Do we allow them into the country? Okay? Everyone has a right to a nationality. And that's sometimes difficult because there are many people, Sabah is a classic example, there are many people who are what we call undocumented. The borders between Malaysia, Sabah, and the Philippines, for example, is a very porous border. You speak to people who work in immigration, or you speak to people who work with migrants, with refugees in those areas, you'll find that there are actually landing points in Sabah. There are actually places in the Philippines. You might send a worker back because you find them in the state. If they ask for documents, they don't have documents. So of course, then they are sent back to the Philippines. The next day, they're on some speedboat coming back to Sabah, right? And when you look into the backgrounds of many of these people, they say, I was born in Sabah. I'm third generation. I don't know anybody in the Philippines. This is my home. But I have no documents to prove this. Why? Because he could have been the offspring of a Malaysian parent and a Filipino woman. Malaysian parent had already left the marriage, but they have children. They never formally documented the union, and therefore the children then have no documents to show that they're actually born in Malaysia. So they have no documents, therefore, to go back to the Philippines because except for the fact that the mother maybe had been a Filipino, but the mother also may have disappeared. And so you've got these children on the streets in KK who have no home, neither here nor there. Philippines doesn't accept them, Malaysia doesn't accept them. So no nationality. And there are thousands of them in such situations, right? Everyone has a right. No one has the right to hold you to slavery. No one has a right to torture you. And I will show you in the next slide the realities that still happen today. And everyone has a right to education. I choose this because this is something that is very real for all of us. Huh? Everyone has a right to education, but think about the people who leave their countries in the millions. Just take the most recent Ukraine war. I will show you a slide about that in a short while. And you think of just a year ago when the war started, millions of people who were displaced, no education. Education was just disrupted because bombs were just falling all over Kiev and the surrounding areas in different parts of the country. And overnight, you had over 6 million people who just left the country. Where do they go? What happens to the children? What happens to your education? Right? During COVID, what happened to the children in the rural areas? You know, when you look at the different data during the height of COVID, there were two populations of people in Malaysia itself, and this was similar to experiences in different parts of the world. The urban people very quickly transitioned because they had all the necessary devices to do online learning. The people in the rural areas had no such opportunities. Teachers didn't have the devices. Families didn't have those devices. If you got a family of 3 or 4, how do you learn with only one smartphone that maybe the father has for his or her own work, right? So then, of course, they don't go to school for 2 to 3 years. And people are surprised, oh, our SPM results are so bad this year. Why are they bad this year? Because for the last 2 to 3 years, children didn't learn. And even if they did, what interest would they have if the learning is the people who who teach online are not trained? It's not just about turning on your device, going on internet and talking through online. That's not online learning. Yeah. So when you think about the access to education, everyone has that right. There are millions, even in our own country, sometimes who are deprived of that right to education, especially migrant workers. And I'll come to some examples in a short while. Yeah. Human trafficking, as I mentioned, remember, no one has a right to torture you, to make you a slave. And this is a recent 29 August report, yeah? The UN warns of hundreds of thousands trafficked into online crime in Southeast Asia under threat of torture. At least 120 people across Myanmar may be held in situations where they are forced to carry out online scams. Estimates in Cambodia around 100,000 people. And there are many Malaysians also, by the way, who look at the ads, promise of a good job, seems like a decent job. When you arrive in those respective countries, only then to be taken in by the syndicate, and you're forced, therefore, to work in these scams, whether you like it or not. And if you try to escape, you will be tortured, at times killed. Right? So those realities are real. So just a brief overview on trying to understand what does it mean when we say universal human rights. We all have an equal right to life, freedom, liberty, as the French would say. Yeah? The right to mental health came out in 2016 from the Human Rights Council, and then 73 states made a joint statement to highlight the centrality of mental health and recognize that to fully integrate the human rights perspective into mental health and community services to eliminate violence, discrimination, while promoting for inclusion and participation. Simply said, there needs to be, we have to be constantly on the lookout for situations when populations at risk don't have access to the same kinds of services that the rest of the population would have access to. Archbishop alluded to this briefly in his opening remarks, that yeah, even the rich will have their own problems. Yeah? It doesn't mean that the rich will have access to all of this. That they don't have mental health issues. Of course they do. But they have access. If they want that service, they have that. What about migrant populations, refugees, asylum seekers? Do they have those populations? People who are undocumented in this country, those who are in refugee camps, do they have equal access to those services? Yeah? Are those services even available extensively to all of us throughout the country? The Archdiocesan Mental Health Ministry has one center. How many centers do we have that provide that kind of support to all and sundry at different levels? A lot of people can't afford, even if they have access to it, they can't afford to pay for those services. Yeah, because the people who manage it while it's a service. They also have to pay for salaries, etc. And they have to have a scale. And you can only have so many people that you can give the service for free unless there's enough funding to be able to support those centers. Yeah? So that's another reality. And that's why one of the ideals is that we should, in order for us to have a rights-based perspective to mental health, we must ensure the accessibility of such services to all and sundry. Yeah? So what is mental health? Looking at the universal human rights, let's look at the other component of this year's theme. Mental health is a universal human right. What is mental health? The definition from the World Health Organization, it includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, how we feel, how we act. It determines how we handle stress, relate to others, make choices. It is important in every stage of life, from childhood to adolescence to adulthood. That's mental health. You don't see in the definition anything about mental disorders. You don't see anything about mental illness. When this is not taken care of, when we don't make efforts to help people in all of these different areas of our growth and development, then that will lead to the sort of mental disorders that will require then more professional help and mental illness from highly specialized people. And so, simply put, it's a state of being where we realize our own abilities, we can cope with the normal stresses of life, we can work productively, fruitfully, and able to make a contribution to society. I mean, that's what we all want in our communities, isn't it? In our families, in society, in our workplace, that anyone that you hire to do a job is able to contribute for the salary that he or she receives. That anyone who comes, our family members, that we raise them, we give them all sorts of opportunities for them to be able to pursue their dreams, right? Any member of the congregation who comes must be able to find solace so that, when they leave after the 1 hour of service, 1 hour of spiritual nourishment, they are able to go back to their workplace, to their homes, to their families, and be that productive person, live a life that is meaningful, that is purposeful, that has got direction, that can contribute to the people around him or her. That's the essence of mental health, to be able to do all of those things. The question, and therefore, when you think of mental health today, it's not anymore about, can you go to the next slide, please? I'm 2 slides already, 2 slides away. Yes, thank you. When you think of mental health, therefore, it is not anymore about people who are ill. So there's a continuum. People who are mentally ill, people who are injured, yes, they are the ones that will need your clinical psychologists, your psychiatrists. They will need medication for some of the serious disorders. But there is also people who are healthy. There are people who are already getting stressed, and if they don't take care of themselves, they will then move on to the stage of being injured and ill. Yeah? But does it mean that when you are there, when you are injured or ill, in terms of your mental health, does it mean that you are stuck there for the rest of your life? The answer is no. Let me repeat that. Just because you suffer from a mental disorder or mental illness, it doesn't mean you remain there in terms of mental health for the rest of your life. Why? For the last almost 70 years already, when you look at mental asylums, mental hospitals, like the one we have in Hospital Bahagia in Tampoi, from the 1850s to the 1950s, for about 100 years, you would see, if you look at the data, the trend of these hospitals growing. Like in the UK, for example, you had about, at the height of it in the 1950s, 200, 300,000 people who were there. In the US, it's about 500,000 over people who were in mental hospitals. Then in the 60s onwards, because of the advent of psychotic drugs, that we were able to help people who suffered from those sort of serious mental illnesses and disorders, you will come across a word called desanitization of those institutions, or the deinstitutionalization of those institutions. Meaning that people with those serious mental disorders, with the right kind of treatment, whether medication and or therapy, they are able to live somewhat dignified, normal lives out in the community. I remember visiting some of these centers where you had a community center and people who would receive treatment there but they will live on their own. They will be working as a cashier in Walmart or in some supermarket or in some grocery store. They can manage themselves, they can go back home, cook their meals, handle dangerous equipment in the kitchen or whatever. But they can manage themselves, living that dignified life because of the support that they will receive. So somewhat normal lives, even having been diagnosed with schizophrenia or different kinds of disorders and mental illnesses that they would have. Suggesting therefore that it is possible that even if we are there, we don't have to stigmatize people. Oh, this person was a former patient in Hospital Bahagia, right? And therefore we are afraid, we worry about whether he will be a danger or harm. As long as the person takes the medication, and I've come across people like this, when you see them on the streets, you would never know because they are receiving the necessary treatment. Okay, and they can then move back to the level of being productive. And if that definition is when you look at the definition of what mental health is, yes, they are able to be mentally healthy even if they suffer from a mental disorder. Yeah, so that's an important point to remember. Next slide, please. So what are the factors that impact on our mental health? Yeah? So 3 areas are psychological, biological, and social factors. So from the psychological, so when we experience severe trauma, so think of populations that I talked about earlier on. Refugee populations, migrant populations, asylum seekers, people who run away because they are victims or they are unfortunately caught up in a conflict in their country. Yeah? They're caught between 2 warring factions. Traumatic. Can you imagine a child growing up every day just listening to bombs, shells falling around him on a regular basis? That's traumatic. Any one of us going through any kind of experience that is life-threatening is traumatic. Losing a loved one, that certainly is, and we don't know how to deal with the grief and loss of someone that leaves us, someone who is very close to us, very sudden death. Yeah, so people do respond out of the normal grieving process that happens. Being involved in a serious accident or victim of a violent crime or war. All of those are factors that contribute towards mental health or mental illnesses. Then the biological, if there are brain injuries that can impact on our moods, our behavior, a long-term health condition. So, when you suffer from a clinical issue, a critical health issue, and it takes a long time, the pain that you go through, trying to treat your cancer, trying to treat some disability, certainly that will have an impact on a person's mental health. I'll just give you a very personal example. When my mother, when she was alive, she survived 2 husbands. Yeah, she was widowed twice. When I remember her, I remember her very fondly because despite the losses that she had over the death of she outlived 2 husbands. She had 7 children. I'm the youngest of 7. She was a very outgoing kind of person. Nothing gave my mother more joy than to travel and see the world, right? And so when she had retired and my father had passed away, of course the sadness, because she had spent 25 years with him. And she was already a retired teacher, had some savings, and worried about, all of us. I would say to her, Ma, that money that you have is your money. You don't have to worry about all of us. Your 7 children can manage life by themselves. Use your money, go wherever you want to go. Live the life that you want to live. And so nothing would give her more joy than to visit my sister in the UK or follow my sister, another sister who had gone to Boston with her husband, when he went there to study, or to, go to another sister's place in the same hometown. Just that gave her a sense of happiness, joy, kept her alive. When she was stuck at home for 2-3 months, she would just be all sorts of psychosomatic problems. I've got ache here, I've got pain here, I can't see properly, those sort of things that happen with aging, yeah? Then one day she had a very serious stroke. And she had been warning us about the impending stroke for 4 months, 6 months, about eyesight, giddiness, etc. And we just assumed that it was just one of those, she needed attention. We never paid close attention to it until she actually had the stroke. And when I looked at all the signs and symptoms of an impending stroke, I realized, my goodness, we should have paid more attention and sent her for a scan. But too late to realize how dumb we were in many ways. So when she had the stroke, for the next 4 years, I saw her maybe smile once in those 4 years. Because everything changed. The brain had changed, the structure had changed, parts of the brain were already dead. The only time when I actually saw her smile was when my daughter at that time was a 2 or 3-year-old daughter. She was in a wheelchair. We were in the hospital waiting for her appointment. She carried one leg, which was the leg that was paralyzed. And for a 3-year-old, carried the leg, very instinctively just dropped it and just said, heavy. And my mother chuckled. That was the only time in 4 years. And when I looked at her, and I remembered the woman she was, the personality had also changed. And she really was in depression. So I one day asked her, Mom, what's happening to you? How come, in those lucid moments when she could remember? And she said this very simply, look at me. Look at me now. I can't do anything without anyone helping me. And then she just slipped back into that state that she was in. One moment of lucidity, and she still was aware. And so, biologically, those things will happen. Yeah? And then when she finally did pass away, for me, it was gentle mercy. She had suffered so long. She had carried, we often say, Lord, help me to carry this cross of illness. She had carried the cross, a good Christian, and gone back home finally to be with the Lord and her 2 husbands, wherever they were. And then, of course, the social side, experiencing racism, xenophobia, any kind of discrimination, being a victim of domestic violence, bullying, drugs, alcohol abuse, etc. All of those things will impact on some aspect or another of our ability to function normally and to contribute to the world around us, right? Can we go on to the next slide? Yeah? So what is the link between mental health being a universal human right and mental health? Let me put this in front of us again. So trying to just show you the link, I showed you 5 components of universal human right. Yeah? So let me go into some details to show you that link. Can I go to the next slide, please? Just take the Ukraine war as one of many hundreds of different kinds of experiences. That's just one to talk about the impact of mental health on internally displaced people, right? So they were in their country, one of the richest countries in the world, because of the grain embargo, prices of wheat, your bread, everything has gone up in Malaysia and around the world because of that. So they were one of the richest countries because the largest producer of grain in the world. And so when that happened, based on the International Migration Office, about 6 million people left the country. They were relocated, they were impacted in some way or the other. And when there was data, research done on just a small sample of that population, this is what they noticed of the people who then moved on to migrate to Poland. 40% of this sample of just 623, 40% suffered from anger issues, 57% depression, 53% anxiety, sleep disturbances, 15%. That one impact of another country invading into Ukraine impacted on the population. So if this small sample is a reflection, then you can imagine of the 6 million people, by extension. Now, of course, there should be more studies, there's no question about that. But this just gives us a sense of what war does to people. They may not directly be victims of the war, but they are victims of the war when they are no more able to stay in the comfort of their own home without fear of death. Yeah? If we go on to the next slide, UNHCR, next slide please. Yeah. UNHCR stats on my refugee crisis in the world. That's a lot of people. We are a country of about 35 million people. That's a lot of people who are refugees alone. Okay, and this is at the end of last year. The stats is from at the end of last year. 62.5 million are internally displaced. 55.4 million are asylum seekers. 35.3 million are refugees. And 5.2 million are other people in need of some kind of international protection. Right? So, let's take a look, break down even further. Next slide, please. Of the 108 million, 43.3 million are children. That's about a third, almost half of these people who are refugees. And of this 43.3, 1.9 million people are actually children born as refugees. Their first day of life in this world, they are already refugees. So, think back of what I just said 2 or 3 slides ago, right? Children themselves are impacted when they are stateless. They have a right to a nationality. But the moment you are born, you have no nationality anymore. You have no country to go to. You are born in a foreign land. You are born in a refugee camp, right? Half of all refugee children remain out of school. That's about 20 over million remain out of school. And we say that education offers a stable and safe environment for displaced children, helps them to rebuild their communities, pursue productive, meaningful life. Education, they say, is the great equalizer in life. But yet, half of these people don't have access to education. And I'll give you another simple example. Sometimes we are approached by various agencies, various individuals. We have a lot of refugees who are registered as refugees, official refugees. They have an official refugee card. But the law does not allow us to take them in and give them free education even if we wanted to. If we did, and if it was found out, these children, we would lose our license as an institution. Strange law, but it's there. And so, we have come across people with fantastic results, certainly very capable, very intelligent. But we can't take them in because of the kind of immigration laws that we have. And without the opportunity for these children, even if they wanted to study, even if they are capable of doing well academically, the opportunities are not there. So remember one of the rights, every child has a right, everyone has a right to access education. And refugees are not, right? Why? Because, let me go to this, yeah? As far as Malaysia, because we are not a signatory of the convention related to the status of refugees, it makes all refugees and asylum seekers as illegal immigrants under our current immigration laws. That's the reality. But look at the number of asylum seekers and refugees in the country. These are Malaysian stats. Right? So you understand the quandary. Yeah? So we're not just giving lip service to this title. Mental health, it's a universal human right. Because if you don't approach a rights-based perspective to giving access to opportunities, then as I said earlier on, what will be the impact of having those rights deprived on the social, emotional, psychological health of these people, of this population? Let me go back to the, I'm looking at one slide and you're looking at something else. Okay, come back to this, yeah? Can we go back to the slide? Can we go to the next slide after this, please? Sorry, yeah? So that yeah, stay there for a while. This is the one I was referring to, that all refugees in Malaysia are technically illegal immigrants, and therefore, that's why they will have no access to education, yeah? And they are, based on, this is 2 months ago, figures of 2 months ago from UNHCR, right? Look at the number of asylum seekers fleeing war, fleeing persecution in the country. Can we go back to the slide before this, please? Okay, so in terms of the mental health of refugee children, this is a research done last year, and this is what was reported. Compared to refugee children in first world countries who have been able to migrate to first world countries, compare that, all of them, many of them also between 19 to 35 to 53%, etc., etc. Look at worldwide, the clinical assessments, 23% with post-traumatic stress, 14% depression, 16% anxiety, and comparisons with the rest of the world of non-refugee, much higher than just the regular incidence or prevalence of such clinical issues among the refugee population. So very high risk to such children. So just think about also the question, when children like this are impacted, what type of adults do they grow on to become? What about people if your childhood has been laced with trauma, with this sort of mental illnesses from such an early age? You're already exposed to certain sort of clinical issues. What hope and chance do they have for them and for their families after this? So it becomes another vicious cycle, yeah? Can we go on to 2 slides after this? Yeah, okay. So let me try and show, therefore, the link between health and well-being of migrant workers in Malaysia. And this is some stats from just last year. So we have 2.2 million documented migrant workers, versus anywhere from 1.2 to 3.5. No one really knows the actual figures. A whole lot of undocumented people. And you will know this when you go Sunday to Pudu Raya. You will see a whole lot of people that are there. Some are documented, some are undocumented. We don't really know, okay? Out of this 2.2 million documented migrant workers, many come from our ASEAN neighbors, yeah? Indonesia, the Philippines, Myanmar, Thailand, South Asia. So Southeast Asia, South Asia. And they're all engaged in different industries because our locals don't want to work in those industries, yeah? So whether it's plantation, agricultural services, domestic work, right? And they contribute to 15.3% of our workforce. Thanks to them, we still have an economy because Malaysians don't want to work in those jobs, and our economy relies heavily on those people working in those areas, right? And yet, how are they treated? What happens to them? Yeah. Next slide, please. Yeah. So, what are the stresses that they actually go to? Anyone here actually works with migrant workers? I'm just curious. Anyone here works with migrants? Yeah. Can I put you on the spot and what is the reason why many of them come to us from your experience?
It depends which country they're from. If they're from Somalia, then it's war. Afghanistan is war. Myanmar is a bit mixed. You have some that are from war areas, but some that are economic asylum seekers. Pakistan is, those are, I work with refugees, not migrants, so I don't know about the other illegal migrants. But the refugees, roughly, the Pakistanis come because of religion.
And next question, what is the journey like for them as refugees coming in?
Depends which country they're from. Usually the ones that are Somalia, Afghanistan, Pakistan, they fly in. And then they apply for UN card. If it's like Myanmar, some of them fly in. Some of them come by the land route, so they come through Thailand, and then they go down through human traffickers. Then they pile them up into vans, like really small, very squash spaces. Then they come through, just come straight from Thailand down to Klang Valley.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, yeah. So when you think about, let's go back to the pre-immigration. Huh? So refugees, and let me add migrants also. Why would a migrant come and work in this country? Just ask ourselves this question. And many of us have had the opportunities to work in white-collar jobs in different countries, opportunities to teach internationally, be some senior manager in some big Fortune 500 company, right? And then you have, your salary package itself is attractive enough for you to want to go there. And of course, new experience, first world country. Would you want to do a job if it was in a country socioeconomically much lower than us, in a job worse off than us, than what you have there? No. The reason why people go, the millions that come to us, is because they want a better life. And that's the reason why they leave their home countries. By choice or by force? By force, as what she mentioned, because of the circumstances in their country, because of war, etc. By choice, because they are in dire poverty. The countries that I mentioned earlier on, many of these countries, they can't support their own population, their own citizens. And so, the golden dream, that's why many people went to America in the 1800s, early 1900s, the huge migration, why people trekked for weeks and months in South America to go to America, and face rapists, face gangsters, face cartels, who will then, when you travel, you leave your country, you try to avoid the war, to live, and along your journey, you find war. I'm old enough to remember stories about the Vietnamese refugees coming over to our shores. As they were on their, the boat people, we call them, going through the South China Sea or the West Philippine Sea, depending on whether you speak to a Filipino or you speak to a Malay, to a Chinese. They will be attacked by Thai pirates. Women will inevitably be raped, right? And deprive you of all your savings, your gold, and whatever valuables you have, and send you on your way, and be lucky you are alive. And when they come to Malaysian shores, they are sent immediately to Sungai Besi Detention Center, where one tin of Milo will cost 10 times more than what we will buy, because people along the way get their cuts, right? So already hazardous, leaving your country to find a better life. Along the way, the migration, the travel, the transit, packed into vans, they come here. Then post-migration, once they are already here, where are they put? If they are refugees, in camps. You have seen all of those refugee camps in the news on the regular basis. Yeah? You've seen camps that are here in Malaysia where we have a lot of refugees, legal and illegal. I know the authorities close a blind eye to those places. But where else to go? And then you have those squatter settlements. And if you're lucky, if you are finally able to find a formal country to adopt you, do you have the same rights as other people in the country? Then you have issues of integration, acculturation, acceptance, because there's a whole lot of prejudice about people of a different culture, different skin color, different religion, etc. From the time you leave by choice or by force, every step of the way, there will be impact. So put ourselves in that situation. Is what, I teach my students. I was just giving them a class last night on empathy, empathic understanding. And empathy means putting yourself in the shoes of another and ask that question, what is it like to be like this, to live a life like this? I'll give you a very simple illustration. Some years ago, I was invited to give a talk on security guards at some security forum in Singapore. And I did some research on security guards. And what was interesting, so as part of my preparation, I spoke to my own security guards in the university, in the school, just to find out their stories, right? And you'll find that they all work 12-hour shifts, not 8-hour, 12-hour shifts. Mondays to Saturdays, one day off on Sunday. Recently, I found out that one of our guards in the building where my office is, he works, I say, because I have a Sunday class, a weekend classes, adult students. I say, why are you here? Monday to Friday, you don't have off day. He smiles at me. Choice. He has an off day, but he chooses to work even on the Sunday because he needs the additional income. And whatever income that they have, minimum wage has gone up, yes, from 1,005 to now about 2,005 or 2,000, I forget what's the minimum for migrant workers. He still sends everything back home. And that's it. You know, no savings. If anything happens to him when he reaches his 50s, when he cannot work anymore, can't work in any other country, no savings. Then, you know, we all worry about insurance when we hit past 70. Yeah? I'm coming close to that age in a couple of years' time, Archbishop. So what happens? We don't have insurance to cover us, and thankfully we may have a bit of savings, and hopefully it's not such a critical illness. What happens to these people after 50? No savings, everything stand home? Gone. What happens to them? And therefore ask the question, what happens to their mental health? What happens to their health and well-being in situations like this? That's the reality of migrant workers and refugees. And that's just one small population of the 27 that you see in the Universal Human Rights Declaration. Yeah. Next. Let me speed up a little bit. Yeah. So take a look at some examples. I don't know if you are able to read. I'm sorry if it's quite far. There were a whole lot of. This was the research that was done this year. Last year it was published this year. And it studied the globalization and the health and well-being of migrant domestic workers in Malaysia. So this is a Malaysian study. Yeah? Of course, there were different points. I just want to highlight 3 stories. It was a qualitative study, meaning that they interviewed about 50 over different migrants from different segments of the workforce here, just to assess what are some of the stresses that they go through. A story of Helma, a middle-aged Indonesian widow with 5 children, praying for a good employer. I remember reading the news last week. There was an Indonesian woman who had worked for a former politician. She was beaten, she was scalded, she was broken bones, waking up at odd hours of the day, morning, and just physically abused. That person now is on the blacklist, cannot ever go to Indonesia again. Yeah. And so she said, I imagine it like this. If my luck is like the husk, I'll float. If my luck is like stone, I'll sink. Simply put, if I'm not lucky, I die lah. Life is already so bad in their home countries. That's the only reason why people want to come to our country. But then there are so many employers who use them, who exploit them, who traffic them, who work them to the bones, and yet we expect people like our security guards to be vigilant. 12 hours, stand on your feet. Tabe, right? 12 hours in the hot sun, rain, thunderstorm, stand at the gate and be vigilant. Humanly possible or not? 7 days a week? Of course not. And yet, you will find people who will drive into our compounds, scream and yell at the guard, do you know who I am or not? Mistreat them, humiliate them, discriminate against them. You only work as a guard? And these people leave homes for a better life for themselves and their families. So think of the mental health impact on people like this. Migration process and costs, the influence, how does this impact on well-being? This is a story from Jen on a trip, recalling her trip 5 years ago coming to Malaysia. The expenditure of the journey to Malaysia, the first from the village to Jakarta. My old folks had given me 1 million rupiah, that's about 10,000 ringgit or something, I forget what's the current exchange rate. And then to Malaysia, and after that in Malaysia, the agent responsible for everything. Then I was sent to employer, but for 5.5 months I was without pay because of the deductions from the agency. And those of you who have domestic helpers, you know this to be true, right? Many of these agencies are unscrupulous. They will withhold your passport, and you therefore, if you are not lucky, you will be worked to the bone. And this is a story of Rosanda, the employment conditions. Not all employers are like this. Let me qualify that also. They're very, very good employers in situations like this. A young Filipino describes, typical day, I get up in the morning, 5:30, I take all the clothes, put in the washing machine, and then cooking for my ma'am's lunch, bring into the office. Then I'm outside, cleaning the car, mopping the floor, then after that, baking breakfast for my boss, and after making breakfast, I go out again, wash the car outside. Then after doing breakfast, washing the hand washing clothes, it's already 11 o'clock. I cook lunch for the kids. Then after that, I continue cleaning. After cleaning, ironing, and the ironing preparation for dinner, and until 9 o'clock. Because my ma'am, after she comes back late, if she comes back late, I have to wait until past 10 o'clock. 5:30 to 10 o'clock. How many hours is that? The labor law says can only work 8 hours with rest times in between. If you work in Australia, you do this sort of things, you will be sent to prison. I know I lived in Australia for 6 years, right? So just bear in mind the conditions of work. For the meager, if 600 USD minimum wage that they are supposed to earn, a lot of which then goes to the agent for the privilege of bringing you to work in a country like Malaysia. So question therefore is, next slide please, just recall this slide. Finishing soon. We're all born free and equal. Everyone is entitled to the rights, no matter your race, religion, sex, language, nationality. Everyone has a right to life, freedom, and safety. And I just talked about these 5 areas out of the 27 areas. Next slide, please. The findings, let me just share very quickly the findings. Sorry to keep you so long with all of this heavy-duty data. Asylum seekers, refugees are more likely to experience poor mental health than the local population. Sorry, some of these references are a bit dated, a bit old, but I suspect if I'm able to find more current research, they won't be very far away from this. Increased vulnerability to mental health that refugees and asylum seekers face is linked to pre-immigration experience such as war, post-immigration conditions such as separation from families, difficulties with asylum procedures, and poor housing. Yeah? Next slide, please. They experience higher rates of depression, PTSD, and anxiety disorders, as we saw that with refugee children across the world. More at risk, more susceptible to mental health issues. Yeah? And finally, asylum seekers are 5 times more likely to have mental health issues than the general population, and more than 61 will likely experience severe mental illness. However, they are less likely to receive support from the general population, which then brings us to the question, mental health is a universal human right. If they are 61% less and they are less likely to receive the health and support from the local populations that they officially even work in, then how can we say that this is a universal human right if they don't have access to the same rights as somebody who might be living in Mount Kiara or in Damansara Heights? Yeah. So some ideas before I end. Can we move on? Can we move on? Some ideas about what all of us can do. Yeah. Some ideas. And while this model that I'm sharing with you is really a model mental health and psychosocial support for children. I think what is there will be useful, relevant also to anyone interested in doing any kind of work. And as Archbishop alluded to again just now, yeah, it doesn't mean that you have to be a psychiatrist, clinical psychologist, counseling psychologist like myself, or licensed registered counselor like Father Philip to be able to provide any kind of mental health support. All of us can play a part, whether as an employer, whether just as a concerned citizen, whether a member of the faithful in the churches and parishes that we're in, yeah? Whether as a friend, a colleague in an office, all of us can play a part in making this year's theme on mental health as a universal human right a reality, at least for the people around us and in our immediate sphere of influence. Yeah, so all of us have that. So basic services, yeah, to ensure that the people we hire, we employ have access to this. And during, and some of them, when they are resettled into high-income countries, that they also have access to education, yeah, and they have access to mental health opportunities. If, they do suffer from mental illnesses, that accessibility, right? So all of us can play a part in ensuring this. Yeah? And if we know of agencies that when we go to get them to have those things, they don't provide them, then we have to be a voice somewhere, right? For the people who work with us and work for us. Next slide, please. Community and family supports, and this is important, so we can help those populations by offering, if you're an expert in parenting, if you've got insights into this, offer to those communities, those populations, right? Programs to strengthen the parent-child relationship, because children are highly impacted by this. For us ourselves to understand where our fellow human beings come from other countries when they come and work with us. Yeah, to understand the culture, to help them understand our culture, to help them integrate into our culture. What is it that we can do to improve the education of their children? There are so many communities that approach us for help with education, and we try to find ways and means to improve in those refugee schools, at least for them to be able to have their own quality of education, so that there will be some equality, some access to be able to just learn, and at some point, hopefully, use that education to help their families out of that situation that they are in. Okay, next one. Then when we talk about the focused non-specialized supports, we talk about what is it, this is when days like today, when you have, I see music therapy, drama therapy, there might be non-specialized supports, but using the different kinds of infrastructure that you have for different kinds of professionals in different settings to be able to offer, whether you are teachers, non-specialists in mental health, but you have areas of expertise, and I'll share with you one story at the end, but what we can do to bring communities together in a non-threatening environment, where people can then feel as if they are part of a community, because that's a critical part to helping people with develop their mental health or maintain their mental health. And finally, specialized services, and this of course is when you need the experts of psychiatrists, clinical psychologists to work with people who already then suffer from those mental illnesses. All right, so right through, all of us can play a part with this. Now, even if you do have access to those services, I mean, just take us. Many people, if you tell them, I'm going to see a counselor, I'm going to see a psychologist, people look at you strangely and say, something wrong with you. What's wrong with you? You psycho already. Right? Because of the stigma. Or if you have a family member, right, who suffers from some mental illness, and you need to get help because the person cannot sleep 2 o'clock in the morning, making all sorts of sounds, banging this, banging that, breaking things. You need to get help. But we are so afraid. We're so afraid to reach out because of the stigma. I did some work on help-seeking attitudes of Asians. Asians. And the stigma is because why do many Asians don't go? Because of the disgrace, the societal disapproval, the discrediting of individuals who have mental health. You see somebody with a mental health issue, well, I want to employ this person in my organization. You suffer from depression before? Oh yeah, maybe not. Right? Those are realities. So, how do we overcome the stigma? The stigma is also attitudes. And also one is what we call self-stigma. I feel embarrassed. Asian culture, don't watch dirty linen in public. Don't wash dirty linen in public. Don't tell the whole world about your family secrets. All the things wrong in our family. Very embarrassing. Thai say lah, no face. Yeah. We have no face. You talk to people about cannot. Too shameful. And that's why we don't go. We don't go and seek help. So even if it's accessible, even if Father Philip has done a wonderful job with developing center, people don't go, people don't call. I was walking here just now with somebody who manages the care line and say, how's business? Very slow. People don't call. I need help, but I don't know, I don't want to talk about it. So keep it in. Keep it in doesn't mean it will go away. Keep it in, it just gets worse. Just like you're suffering from something physically, you don't go and see a doctor, it will just get worse. You can sleep, you can deny. No. Eventually, when the blood is too much already, the pain is too much, you go and see a doctor. Doctor says, why didn't you come 6 months earlier when you first saw the signs? Now already stage 4. Yeah, too late. Okay, so that self-stigma or perceived stigma, and therefore, people don't come. So what is it that we can do? The stigma also sometimes is gender-based. Men, oh, we are supposed to be strong. Well, we are not supposed to show that we have any weakness at all. We are the apex predator in the world, men, right? And so culture impacts on this. We raise our children, boys don't cry, don't feel, don't do anything, just be strong. And therefore, when children are not typically strong, what happens to them? And they feel ashamed You go and seek. Yeah? So there are gender issues, cultural issues that also prevents people from seeking help. And so what do we need to do about stigma and discrimination? Be mindful of the language that we ourselves use. Things like totally psycho, bipolar, I'm a bit OCD, don't be mental. All of those things are just label people. We have enough labels in the world. We don't need any more labels to describe the problems that we go through. Yeah, that just then becomes another hindrance to people going out to seek help. We should be open, easy, accessible, and welcomed. Because if you have people who are not mentally healthy, how do you have a society that's productive, that is working towards whatever Malaysia Madani or 2020, 25, whatever developed nation status that we want to work towards? Can't. The health of the nation demands that we do this. We make those services accessible and affordable. Yeah. So all of these comments, reinforcing stereotypes. Can we move on? Move on. I'm slight, so we keep going, please. Keep going. Go. Right. Go down to the slide before this. Hang in there. 2 more slides. Avoid making judgments. Don't ignore people seeking help. Open up to friends. Don't avoid people with mental health diagnosis. They won't, if they are properly helped, they are not a danger to anybody, right? So our own attitudes towards those who do suffer from mental illness, we have to maybe ourselves reflect on that, yeah? And finally, yeah? Next slide, last slide. If all else fails, it's there, it's accessible, people still don't go, you do everything that you can to try and provide support, people still don't want to come because this idea of trying to seek help. And this is really a reflection from a priest friend of mine who recently shared with me. He was working with migrant workers and refugees before. And he said, yeah, you know, I noticed in the migrant community, they will come when you have those weaving session, cooking session, crocheting sessions, those social opportunities for social coming together. Non-threatening, yeah? But it's a community coming together, doing things together, they have fun, they talk about it, they feel supported, they are recognized, they are affirmed, and then create opportunities in those non-threatening environments to talk about how are we doing? How are we doing mentally, emotionally, psychologically? And then people will open up. Because it's done in a non-threatening environment, it's not going to a Archdiocesan mental health center, right? Because there are stigmas that are there. And so it's just being creative to find every means possible to dispel the notion that mental health is a problem. It's something that only poor people or certain populations suffer from. All of us suffer from this. And therefore, all of us, we need to look for opportunities to create the situation, the environment where all of us can access this. Thank you very much. And I wish all of you the very best in making this happen this year in line with our team. Thank you.
Many thanks to Dr. Gerard. Dr. Gerard, kindly remain at your spot as Father Philip would like to pass you a token of appreciation. From Dr. Gerard's talk, we got to delve into first understanding the meaning of what constitutes a universal human right, what is mental health, and show the relationship between these two. There are also stresses from the environmental and societal circumstances, leading to mental health issues among millions of individuals, especially discriminated and risk communities. We hope that the ideas shared will be applied in promoting mental health as a universal human right for all. We will now proceed with a 15-minute break, and during this break, you are also welcome to proceed with the workshops, which will start at 11 a.m. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, kindly be informed that all workshops will be broadcasted live. The plenary talk, sorry. So the plenary talk have been broadcasted online previously. You may also access YouTube to watch the video again. Thank you.